All right, three, two, one. Hi, my name is Jesus Meza. I'm on the pro side. So in today's world, the best way to get to know someone is not through one-on-one face-to-face communication. It's actually going through someone's social media. Here you can find what religion they pertain to, what car they drive, their political beliefs, even what restaurant they dine in. This is important when taking into consideration the issue of Chris Lyndsey. Chris applied for vice president of CVS. Day by day, it seemed more and more likely that Chris would take the position. He had great letters of recommendation, a great resume, some experience behind him. He even did very well in the interview process. Um, However, before making this decision final, CVS decided to go and conduct the social media background check and check his digital footprint. Here, they found a public post of him and his party animal lifestyle, where he partied with girls in bikinis and drank alcohol. However, the decision of ultimately not hiring Chris was taken when the company found public post of Chris bragging about drinking and driving. In recent years, whether or not employees should be qualified or disqualified from a position because of their social media has been up for debate. While some argue that it's private information, it's not a valid representation of who the or what the employee might be like in the work experience in the workplace. Some argue that it's all public information, it's fair game, and it can actually be beneficial and warn the company of the future employees intents, his mannerisms, and other ways that he can affect or she can affect the workplace. So, some definitions to further uh, back up the claim that that government should conduct social media background checks include guilty by association, which is defined as Google as the idea that someone is judged negatively based on their connection to a person, a group, or an idea that's already viewed negatively. Next would be social media background check, which is defined by Indeed for employers as reviewing potential employees' social media and web presence to ensure they are an appropriate fit for the position. Um, so I want to lead off by saying you may not be able to control the consequences, but you can control your actions. Therefore, keeping this in mind and understanding that companies have a right to protect their image and their reputation, which most certainly social media background checks can help with. So I hope that the evidence I will provide can sway you into believing so. So, but before that, I would also like to say that I believe that a course of action that can help would be setting ethical standards and code of conducts that should be enforced in the workplace. And using these standards, you should be used sort of to compare what somebody has on social media to whether or not they're fit for the role. Now, for the arguments, uh, my first argument would be that social media background checks are actually cheaper and more efficient than standard background checks. Uh, According to Nevada State Bank, an article by them, they said that it actually only requires HR personnel and not the funds that regular um, background checks require. Now, some of you might be asking what funds? Well, Bamboo HR actually presented a statistic in their article that states that regular background checks cost anywhere from $20 to $200. So it can be very pricey, especially for those companies that are barely starting up or not a lot of funds. Um, and finally, another great point would be from Reference Service, where they actually stated in the article that it costs anywhere from, well, actually, it costs 12,800 to hire a toxic employee and then further replace that employee. So it can be very pricey, and all this can be avoided through social media background checks. So this matters once again. It helps reduce excessive spending, waste in the company that can be put elsewhere in the company, and it can also ultimately help company turnover. Next, I would like to highlight that social media background checks actually help identify uh, red flag employees. So red flags would be in an employee would be um, racist or sexist behavior, unlawful activity, addiction, um, you know, the list goes on. This is especially important when taking into consideration the following statistics that I'll provide from an article by Philo, where it states 57% of employees have reconsidered candidates because of poor communication skills displayed on social media. 41% of adults believe employers should consider offensive online behavior when hiring. 12% of new hires admitted to illegal behavior discovered after hiring. And then 41% of employers reported having to manage employees' misconduct that began with social media conflict. This is important because when we're in the interview process, you put on a mask and kind of a facade to fit the role and get the job. So social media background checks can actually get personal and catch you off guard and see who you really are. So this matters because it can prevent conflict in the workplace that later turns into turnover, but it can also highlight problems and steer clear of that direction, ensuring the employees are safe, but so is the workplace and the work environment, right? So in conclusion, after presenting my arguments and especially my second argument, the dangers of hiring a red flag employee, I believe that CVS was right in not hiring Chris, especially after bragging about drinking and driving. It would not be a good look for CVS if something were to happen on company time or on the way home from company time. Therefore, I believe that Chris should work on his social media presence or image before he can be considered a serious candidate for vice president of CVS. Thank you.
Hello, CEO Karen Lynch. My name is Jose Torres, and I am on the con side, and I am with.
Hi, my name is Bryan Andrade. I'm also on the con side.
All right, so greetings, Karen. Plant this image inside your head. You have been working endlessly to build a resume that meets the requirements for becoming the VP of Communications at CVS, a job you have been trying to acquire for your whole professional career. Your qualifications exceed what is needed by the employer, and you check all the boxes needed to be hired. After applying for the said job, to later find out that your employer stalked your profile and denied your application because they did not like what they had to see on your social media page. This was Chris Lyndsey's exact situation. Do you think that an individual outside social life should impact their professional career? We think that the employers should not interfere with individuals' social life outside of office hours. It seems like CVS is overstepping here on what matters. Now step foot into the shoes of Chris Lyndsey, where his job application was denied for social media activities. The management team has been looking for a new employee for the position of VP of Communications. Chris Lyndsey, one of the applicants, was a clear standout during the hiring process. Chris has a remarkable resume and performs flawlessly during the interview. After a bit more digging, we find out a little more about him on his social media accounts. Chris's social media feed is filled with younger women in a bathing suits having a good time consuming alcohol. We later find out that Chris also brags about driving under the influence. The team has hit a crossroad, whether social media should be taken into consideration because his actions were outside of the professional work setting. Now, people have an issue whether Chris is still a legitimate candidate for the role. To expand on the issue and the ethical dilemma, companies face a crossroad whether social media screening should play a role when considering job applicants, especially in this current situation where the private social media account is not in collaboration with a professional company or employer. And now talking about in terms and some definitions that will help our case, the right to privacy is defined by the American Civil Liberties Union to mean the right of individuals to live their lives free from unwarranted government or organizational intrusion, allowing them to make personal choices and control information about themselves.
Good morning, Karen. My name is Brian again, and today I'll be explaining our group's ethical framework and how it applies to the hiring decisions for Chris Lyndsey. To begin, let's start with our key vocabulary word, which is personal freedom. According to Cambridge Dictionary, personal freedom is defined as a right of individual to make their own choices and live their lives as they wish without necessary control and interference from others. This concept is important because it highlights every individual's right to privacy and independence, especially outside the workplace. In other words, employees and job applicants should be free to live their personal lives without fear that their choices or social media activities will be used against their professionally. Personal freedom is a basic human right that protects individuality, fairness, and all which are essential for the companies of CVS to uphold. Um, I think that's my partner will say. Next.
Now, to negate the solution, we negate the resolution that companies should not investigate prospective employers' social media profiles when screening them for the job application. The course of action we suggest and will support is we should hire Chris Lyndsey as the VP of Communications, as he is well qualified for the role. We suggest that CVS should not interfere with anyone's private life, as it does not affect professional performance in the office space. Chris Lyndsey has the freedom to practice the right to privacy. We find that CVS is overstepping by stalking Chris's social media. Here, CVS is not responsible for the employee's actions outside office hours. Therefore, Chris should be hired. Now, talking about our first argument, the dangers of using social media in the hiring process. Our argument is that it's not fair to judge, in quote, judge a book by its cover. This is a phrase commonly used which expresses the opinions of something solely based on the outward perspective alone. We believe that this ideology is being used against Chris when checking his social media. By using this, we are creating an unfair bias and discriminating against Chris against his chances of being hired. The evidence to support this is that EEOC states, and open quote, anytime you use an applicant's or employee's background information to make an employment decision, regardless of how you got the information, you must comply with federal laws that protect applicants and employees from discrimination. That includes discrimination based on race, color, national origin, sex or religion, disability, genetic information. This matters because here at CVS, we should prioritize everyone's fair chance at being hired. If CVS would take into consideration every social media accounts for all future applicants, it is possible to create an unfair decision based on the smallest disagreement. Now, for our second argument, screening candidates' social media may lead to too much information and discrimination claims. Our argument is that denying Chris applicants due to a social media account could get us more into serious legal actions. The evidence to support this is screening social media can lead to allegations of discrimination under the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and numerous state laws if the candidate does not get the job. Rosen said, to avoid a lawsuit, you need objective, consistent, and documented procedures to demonstrate information found online is a valid predictor of job performance and used fairly. This matters because taking into consideration Chris' social media performance does not reflect his actions in the office. If we were to deny his application based on what we see online, just like the previous argument, Chris might take matters into his own hands and proceed with a legal action. This will require to use more of our resources to defend a case that was avoidable from the get-go. Now off to Bryan.
Hi, Karen. So yeah, I left off with my vocabulary word which we spoke about. Also, I would like to add about my framework. Now moving forward to the framework that we use to our ethical decision for this situation, our group applied that the right to approach and combine with the ideal of professional responsibility to decide what's fair for ethical when considering Chris Lyndsey application. The right approach focuses on respecting the fundamental rights of the individual, including the right to privacy and the freedom to live personal life without unfair judgment and interference. From this perspective, what Chris Lyndsey does outside work should not determine whether or whether or not he should be hired. As as long as it doesn't impact his job performance, his social media activity occurred off clock hours, has no connection to his qualifications or professional abilities. Denying Chris Lyndsey the position because of his personal post would be both invasion of privacy and unfair judgment of character. CBS, as a respected company, should focus more on what truly matters, a candidate's skills, experience, leadership, and professionalism, rather than its personal life. By allowing the rights approach for CVS can demonstrate ethical leadership, fairness, and respect for individual rights, strengthening its reputation as a company that values both integrity and equality. And also for one of my arguments, which is arguments of social media does not reflect on ability, professional ability. Karen, for our third argument, our team believes that social media should not be used to measure a person's professional ability or character. Social media is a place where you express your humor, your relaxation, and non-professional resume. People use their platforms to share their interests, connect with others, and express creativity. What someone posts outside work should not determine their qualifications, ethics, or leaderships and potential in the workplace. Using social media to evaluate candidates like Chris Lyndsey promotes unfair bias and often leads to misjudgment. Posts can easily be taken out of context and do not accurately represent a person's professionalism or behavior on the job. Instead of employers should focus on tangible qualifications such as communication and job performance, things that clearly impact company success. CVS should make hiring decisions based on professional merit, not personal lifestyle choices. By doing so, the company demonstrates fairness, ethical leadership, and respect for privacy, values that build trust within the organization and with the public. To conclude, Karen, our group firmly believes that CVS should hire Chris Lyndsey as a vice president of communications. He's highly qualified for the position, and his personal life should not influence his professional opportunities. Using social media as a hiring tool can easily result as bias, unfair judgment, and even legal issues. Every applicant deserves to be evaluated based on their skills, experience, and proven performance, not on what they choose to share online in their personal life. At the end of the day, a person's personal life and professional life are two separate matters. By keeping these two separate, CVS can promote fairness, equality, and professionalism through its hiring process. That's what we believe CVS should move forward with Chris Lyndsey, setting an example of ethical decision making and respect for privacy in modern workplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Do you have any rebuttals, Jesus?
Yes. So actually, heading back to you, Jose, I would like to just go over your first argument. So your first argument was not to judge a book by its cover. However, how would that apply here, especially after having proof of a certain lifestyle and irresponsibilities from Chris? With such a high position at stake, wouldn't you be more cautious of who you let into your corporate family? Also, a follow-up question would be, if you're not cautious, wouldn't that make you negligent and put other employees at risk?
Thank you, Jesus, for that great question. Again, going back to my argument, these opinions and expressions are of something solely based on the outward perspective alone. Talking about being negligent, we are not being negligent because screening social media can lead to allegations of discrimination under Title VII on the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and numerous state laws if the candidate does not get the job. We are here to protect all individual employees so that future decision will protect everyone and will not cause any negligence in the forthcoming decision at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. And then would you guys have any rebuttals to my case?
Yes, Jesus, I'll start off one towards you. So while e-background checks and social media screenings may appear cheaper and faster, they raise significant concerns about accuracy, fairness, and privacy. Information found on social media can be misleading, outdated, or taken out of context, which could unfairly influence hiring decisions. Additionally, not all candidates maintain public profiles, leading to inconsistencies, relying solely on digital or social media screenings, risks discrimination, data misuse, and potential liability for employers. My question to you is how you keep running your background checks consistently without running into discrimination or lead to a biased decision?
That's a great question, Jose. Well, yeah, well, in terms of um, biasness, uh, we don't come to a conclusion with the first social media, companies would check. Companies would go through LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, numerous amounts of social media, and if what we find is not there, or what they find is not there, and doesn't meet their standards, um, then obviously an in-person background check would be, it's not a it's an alternative, right, to um, regular background checks. And then, sorry, it was a biasness thing. What was your other question? Part of your question? Sorry.
So how would you run this background checks without running into discrimination or lead to a biased decision?
Right. So I think it go, that's why the ethical standards would be in place, as like I said in my course of action. Um, and I think a great way for companies not to discriminate or be biased would be to have numerous HR personnel conduct these background checks to ensure that everybody is given a fair chance.
Thank you, Jesus. I think Brian has also another question for you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jesus. How's it going? Let me go ahead and ask you another question, man. I have another photo for you. Um, while checking our social media might seem like an effective way to spot red flags, it's it's unreliable and unfair. People post things online for fun or to express opinions that don't reflect on how they actually work in the workforce. One old post or a joke, basically taken out of context, can cause someone to lose an opportunity that they deserve. Not everyone uses social media the same way, and it's not fair for a consistent way to judge someone's character based on their social media. My question here is like, wouldn't it make more sense to make a decision on real interviews and references instead of someone's personal post?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. So yes and no. I think that um, real background or real interviews face to face conduct sort of a mask that people put on to ensure the position, and background while background checks are good, like I said, they're very, very costly. um However, I would like to touch more on that it's not accurate representation of who Chris could have been in the workplace. Um, when you hire somebody, they become essentially family. So in this case, if we hire someone who brags about drinking and driving, um, and we know about that prior to his hiring process, if something were to happen in the workplace, right, especially with such a high position, it wouldn't be a good luck, and it wouldn't be, we could have prevented this. So I think uh, according to the statistics I provided as well, um, a lot of these candidates, they're either done violent things or cause chaos in the workplace. So, um, while it might not be a valid representation, it definitely does show some of their character, when they don't have to sort of act a certain way, right? Because you act a certain way with your family or at school, right? So I think your true colors are shown off when you're yourself, right? You're acting like yourself. So I think that'll be my rebuttal to, or my answer to your question.
Thank you.
All right, Jesus, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. I think
Well,
that's it.
CEO Karen Lynch, I hope you take in consideration these arguments into helping you make your final decision on whether to hire Chris or to not hire Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.